very urgently. So the meeting is going to have a kind of two-part structure. So we're going to start with Bat, who will be our speaker today, and then we're going to talk sort of about like kind of big picture politics, about the state of the movement, and so on. And then we'll have a short break, and then in the second half we'll talk more about practicalities. And in that half, people can maybe like share initiatives that they're involved with, share observations they've had about what's working, share any call-outs that you have for actions. But then the first half is really going to be about focusing on kind of talking politics about the situation. So, Bat, when you're ready, over to you.
All right, thanks a lot for inviting me to talk, Casey. There's an awful lot that we can talk about, so I'm going to try and keep myself to 20 minutes. First half of that is going to be talking about the situation that's both in Gaza itself, but internationally and domestically. Just a kind of capsule analysis of what I think is going on at the moment. The second half, I want to talk in a little bit more detail about some of the arguments within the Palestine solidarity movement, and I specifically want to underline the relevance and timeliness of two classic slogans: from the river to the sea.
Can you speak into the microphone a bit?
From the river to the sea, and the road to Jerusalem lies through Cairo. So I want to talk a little bit about those two slogans and what they mean and the politics behind them. Okay, I'll start with a picture, the analysis of what's happening, and I'll start with what's happening in Gaza, which, as people will probably have seen, there have been now 18 days of continuous bombardment by the Israelis. It's bombs have been dropped on there beyond any kind of recent comparison, and 5,000 is the latest people killed in Gaza. That's just going to go up. That's an underestimate. Why is this happening? Why is this happening now? And why is it intensifying? And a lot of people are asking that question. There are a lot of competing theories about it out there. The thing that people who seem to know what they're talking about and are watching the situation closely are gravitating around is that the reason this bombing campaign is just continuing and intensifying is because kind of no one's in charge. Netanyahu does not really want to launch a ground invasion, and the reason for that is that the IDF are basically just spent the past 20 years terrorising teenagers in Palestine. They are pretty untested as a land army conducting an invasion of a territory with a well-meted and well-armed and well-organised resistance movement. And the last time they tried that was in Lebanon in 2006, and they got routed. So they are very, very nervous about going in. The Israeli military is ready to go in, but Netanyahu is not wanting to press the trigger yet. The other reason is that the US is nervous. The US basically wants to get its diplomatic and military ducks in a row, and it needs to do it very, very quickly. It was caught on the hop by this just as much as Israel was, and so it is playing for time, which is one of the reasons why you're hearing kind of weird and meaningless humanitarian noises coming out of Obama and Biden and what have you recently, which is just strange because it doesn't mean anything. They're not actually allowing, they're not calling for a ceasefire, they're not actually allowing aid into Gaza. So what does this mean? Well, it's really about smoothing diplomatic waters and trying to build an international alliance around what it's about to do. And it's having trouble doing that. And I think that's quite important as well to understand. And this kind of moves me on to the sort of geopolitical situation, because one thing that's very, very rapidly happened is things have polarised away from America. So basically you've got America, Britain, Germany, France, the kind of core Western industrial states who are backing Israel. But everybody else has jumped away. Saudi has jumped away. Jordan's jumped away. Egypt, like 2 weeks ago, the demo in London, I bumped into an old Egyptian comrade who was telling me that the US is essentially offering to write off all of Egypt's foreign debt if it allows the cleansing of the Palestinians into Egypt. But he's not going to do that because that will be explosive in Egypt right now. So basically what is happening is that for the past few years now, the central focus of American imperialism has been on China. Their attitude has been, let's just get out of Afghanistan, get out of the Middle East. We do not want to get involved in a land war in Europe. We need to focus on China. And now already they've been dragged into a land war in Europe, and now they're threatening to be dragged into a war in the Middle East that could explode on multiple fronts. Iran could get involved, Lebanon could get involved. It's an extremely dangerous situation for them. So essentially what is happening is, rather than taking on China, they're finding everybody is polarising around China, and at a time, and they're being forced into this possibly very reckless war at a time not of their choosing. So I think the American ruling class and the Western ruling class is basically paralysed and has got one faction of headbanders saying exterminate all the brutes, we have to finish what we started, and another faction saying no, that's a really stupid idea, last time we did that it did not end well, this is going to be crazy for our long-term strategic interests. And that creates a paralysis at the top. It also gives us on the ground, the wider Palestine solidarity movement, something to give a bit of leverage on. So I want to really talk about, for instance, how this is playing out domestically in Britain now. Because the first thing to say is that basically, you know, Britain's ruling class and media class just went completely nuts at the size of the demo on Saturday. They are absolutely hysterical. The Telegraph has a demo report. The Telegraph does not run reports on left-wing demonstrations in London very often, but it has a demo report. And they are very, very rapidly finding out that while they might have been able to successfully expel support and solidarity with the Palestinians from the kind of, you know, acceptable dinner party opinion circles that they knock about, and they have not done that in the wider movement. The tube driver, who we should all support, by the way, is symptomatic for that. The tube driver was chanting for Palestine. So how have they reacted? Well, yesterday we saw a kind of pro-Israel initiative tried to get launched called the October Declaration. I'm using that. October, I think they'll find, is a trope. And if you look at the names that were signed on it, it was nothing beyond the usual suspects. Graham Linehan's sign, that was the only name that I saw there that was new. So they're really clearly appealing to very, very sane and rational people. The main demand of their thing is bring the hostages home, but that just doesn't even make sense, because of course bring the hostages home intact. Hamas has in fact released 6 hostages so far. The way to release the hostages is to stop the bombing, and then you can trade the hostages for instance, the many Palestinian hostages that the Israelis bring to. It doesn't make sense as a demand, and that's symptomatic of the fact that they've really kind of lost control of the narrative here, and I think that's really important. And you're seeing that play out domestically. Sunak, I mean, you know, Sunak is not a very good war leader, right? Like, even Boris Johnson, they had a go at him. They said, say what you like about Boris, but he's really kind of come into his own about Ukraine. Nobody is saying that about Sunak right now. And I think the Conservative Party just doesn't really know what it's doing at the moment. It's kind of lashing up with the centrists, and there's a lot of instability there. I won't go into it because it's a bit of a distraction from the main points I want to make. The more important thing for us is to see what's happening inside the Labour Party. Starmer is getting his first serious pushback since taking charge. I mean, he's really just discovered that while his army of bureaucrats can factionally purge leftists out of the Labour Party, it's a very, very different matter telling Labour voters what to do. And, you know, even after the Iraq War, 78% of Muslims still vote Labour. Now, I think that number is set to collapse, because Palestine is an issue in people's hearts in a way that, you know, people knew about the bad things that the West had done to Iraq, but Palestine is a different order of magnitude in terms of how central it is to people's lives. I will skip on a bit. Okay, the reaction to the demos being hysterical. There is an ideological fault line breaking out over the question of the ceasefire, because any kind of humanitarian argument whatsoever, you know, bring the hostages home, no to death, whatever, all of those arguments just immediately raise the obvious thing that there should be a ceasefire. And they're finding it harder and harder to hold that line. Ed Davey, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, has called for a ceasefire. The Archbishop of Canterbury, who has been extremely right-wing on these issues for as long as I can remember, has called for a ceasefire. So, you know, there is something there to push at. And I think in terms of our kind of demand in the big mainstream political sphere, we should just be pushing everybody to call for that. But that's not the only thing we're going to be doing here, because we also have to build a wider and deeper Palestine solidarity movement that can take on some of the long-term challenges ahead, and not just deal with the current emergency. So I want to talk a little bit about some of those issues around that building that movement here. One of them is about the chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Now, you might have noticed that the right-wing press has kind of got a bit obsessed with that chant. Is claiming that this means throw the Jews into the sea, and they have trouble selling that because free Palestine from the river to the sea. It's not obvious that this means throw the Jews into the sea, and in fact, it has never meant that. It's a classic slogan of the PLO. It goes back decades, and it was always about how the way you resolve the situation in Palestine is a right of return for Palestinian refugees and then creating a single, secular, binational, multinational state that would encompass all of its citizens, Jewish, Arab, Christian, Muslim, whatever, and on a basis of equality, of one person, one vote. Basically what happened in South Africa when South African apartheid was demolished, dismantled. And the call for Palestine to be free from the river to the sea is actually a nod to that way, that solution to a way of getting justice for the Palestinians. And that vision of a singular, free, democratic state across the entirety of historic Palestine that all its citizens could be part of has come back recently. It has been marginalised for many, many years, partly because of the Oslo Accords, meant that it looked like two states, one state Israel, one state Palestine next to each other, maybe on the 67 borders. This has been the official position of pretty much every party in the Western ruling class for ages, and it's not going to happen, and it hasn't happened. The facts on the ground are clear. There's no way that kind of 67 partition solution could work now without an immense amount of pressure on Israel, and a pressure of that immensity could actually, why bother with partition then? We could actually have a one-state solution. The other aspect of that, why this is becoming a much more important argument, is that the Palestinian resistance movement is becoming much more unified. 2 years ago, in 2021, we saw simultaneous attacks by Hamas on Israel with rockets. There was a strike in the Palestinian community in Israel, the so-called Palestine 48 community, and there were also demonstrations and resistance in the West Bank. And that coming together of a unified Palestinian resistance movement that is infused with the spirit of the Arab revolts and uprisings and revolutions that were just 10, 12 years ago, within living memory. Those two things coming together can be a really, really powerful force in changing the picture and opening up the possibility of a new settlement and serious justice for the Palestinians. The other aspect I touched on there was the Arab Spring, and that's the other slogan that I wanted to talk about. It was a classic slogan that we need to remember, and that is that the road to Jerusalem lies through Cairo. And the understanding there is that what happened to the Palestinians in 1948, what happened to the Palestinians prior to 1948, their entire history cannot be separated from the effects of imperialism on the whole region, on the whole Arab region. So therefore, justice for the Palestinian has to involve some kind of settlement across that whole region. And of course, in that region, Egypt is a country of 80 million people. It has a large working class. It had strikes as part of the uprisings that overthrew Mubarak. There is an incredible potential there for demonstrations over Palestine, but also resistance to the Sisi regime within Cairo. Within Lebanon as well, there are serious issues. If Israel invades, we saw what happened in 2006. So there's an incredibly good article by Simon Asaf today, by the way, who was a socialist workers correspondent in Beirut in 2006, where he talks in some detail about the way that the resistance movement and solidarity movement in Lebanon coalesced and formed the kind of fusion that helped beat off the Israelis both militarily in terms of their invasion, but also inflict a political blow on them. I'm not saying that that situation is identical to what we have here or what we have now, but that notion that resistance and solidarity can bounce off each other in a creative way and actually generate the kind of, we're seeing an extraordinary global Palestine solidarity movement emerge. There were massive marches in Portland, I saw them on Twitter, and I just Googled, what is Portland's Muslim population? 0.3%. That is Portland's Muslim population. So this is a global solidarity movement that goes far beyond traditional ties of community and whatever. And I think our job really is to start getting involved, building that movement, telling everyone we know about it, but also start building a socialist current, a socialist vision within that can argue for a one-state solution as justice for the Palestinians, and argue for a wider transformation across the Arab world and globally of workers and people rising up to fight against their oppressors, because that is what it takes. We've seen that is the only possible political solution we have in front of us, and it's one that's emerging, and we should seize these opportunities while we can. Thank you.
Thank